Proclamation of 1763 is going to be a law that's passed through Parliament. And it's going to be the first law that Parliament passes during the time that George Grenville serves as Prime Minister. So this is kind of his first mark on the office. So the first law passed during the time George Grenville served as Prime Minister of England was this Proclamation of 1763. And the whole reason they passed this law was to settle the conflict between the settlers in England and the Ottawa Indians that were inhabiting the western lands. That was the whole purpose of this thing, because George Grenville did not want to have to get in a conflict with the Indians in the western lands. He had better things to do and he didn't want to be involved in any more wars. They had just finished the French and Indian War, which cost him $22 billion in today's monies. So, the Proclamation of 1763 was passed through Parliament, and it basically established two things. Two things happened as a reason of the proclamation, as a result of the Proclamation of 1763. First of all, there were already settlers who had taken advantage of this and had moved west of the Appalachian Mountains. Well, the first thing the Proclamation of 1763 stated is all the settlers that had moved west of the Appalachian Mountains now had to move back east of the Appalachian Mountains. Okay? So they cleared this area of settlers. So the first part of the Proclamation of 1763 stated that all settlers that were inhabiting lands west of the Appalachian Mountains had to go back into the colonies, or east of the Appalachians. The law ordered all settlers to withdraw from all lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, of all three of those issues that we talked about that the Ottawa Indians were upset about, Caleb, all three of those issues we just talked about, which one do you think upset them the most? The ammunition, the trading, or the settlers coming west?
Settlers.
Settlers coming west, because they were going through their sacred hunting and burial grounds. Well, the second part of the Proclamation of 1763 meant to solve that problem, and so what they did is they gave a specific area back to the Ottawa Indians. And what specific area did they give them, Daniel?
By the mountains there.
Well, their hunting grounds and their spiritual grounds. So what they did is the second part of the Proclamation of 1763 reserved certain lands for the Indians. Which certain lands were they given back? Their original hunting grounds and burial grounds. They gave them back. Would that make them happy? Were the Ottawa Indians happy about the Proclamation of 1763? Absolutely. They were absolutely happy with it. Okay? So the law ordered all settlers to withdraw from all lands west of the Appalachians and go back into the colonies to clear the way for reserving certain lands for Indians, thus granting back their original hunting grounds and spiritual grounds. They were thrilled to death about that. There were four groups of colonists that were not very happy about it. And we'll see if we can get those. We went through second period and they got them all. So what type of people weren't very happy that lived in the colonies about the Proclamation of 1763? Anyone take a shot at someone that was unhappy? Yes, Regan. Farmers, absolutely. Farmers were mad because some of them had already moved over there. And we're going to farm this new land that was rich soil, and they were going to make a profit. So absolutely, farmers were upset. Farmers were upset with the Proclamation of 1763. Well, who's going to be upset kind of in pecking order if the farmers are upset? Who else is going to be upset? What are the what? Well, we'll get to that. Hold that thought. What do the farmers do with their crops that they grow? What?
The buyers of the crops.
The merchants. There you go. Merchants were upset because all of a sudden these merchants are not going to get any crops from the farmers that they're going to sell at a profit, right? Farmers are going to sell to the merchants and make some money. Merchants are going to then sell to the common people and make some money. So merchants are unhappy because they're losing on the deal. Now, Luke, who?
Traders.
Fur traders, right? Rich lands, lots of pelts, lots of money to be made. All of a sudden, these fur traders can't be over here either. So they're losing revenue, which also makes the merchants mad too, because who do you think sold the equipment to the fur traders to go over there to trap furs? Merchants, right? So merchants lose by virtue of the farmers being out of there, and they lose because the fur traders are out of there. And the fur traders are upset because now we're really looking forward to this rich new land that was untapped to get all these pelts, and they're going to get none because they can't be there. One more group, a little more difficult, they're going to be upset. Some that already took action on this and now are going to have to retake their action, so to speak. Who else would be upset? Who else would be upset? What do you think, what other money could be made between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River other than farming, fur trading? Where else might you make some money? Takes money to make money. We talked about that, right? So if you had some extra money, what might you do west of the Appalachians? What? Close. You wouldn't build any buildings, but before you had the buildings, what? No, no, that's a good guess, but not true. You're closer here. Before you build the buildings, what would you have to have?
Get ground.
Land.
Yeah.
Land speculators were upset. Anybody know what a land speculator is? If you're a speculator, what are you trying to do?
Looking at what you want.
Well, but why are they looking at that? What is a land speculator going to do with that land once they buy it in the West, Luke? What are they going to do with it then?
Use it.
How are they going to use it?
Sell it.
They're going to sell it. Right, so they're going to buy cheap and sell it for a lot of money. So a lot of these land speculators already bought land west of the Appalachians because their idea was they were going to sell it at big profit, right? Because the United States was going to expand. Well, all of a sudden now they couldn't own that land over there because it was given to the Ottawa Indians, so they were counting on quick profits from the land they had already bought, and those that hadn't bought still had speculation that they would go over and buy some and make profits. So you got a lot of colonists upset by this Proclamation of 1763 that was passed by the British Parliament. So that's kind of strike one that we're mad at. We're mad, American colonists are mad, strike one, okay? All right. Now that'll take us to our next subtopic, which is putting the British Empire on sound footing financially. Whose job is it going to be? Whose job is it going to be, Andy, to put the British Empire on sound footing financially? Because they're in debt right now. Whose job is it going to be to get them out of debt? One man. No, he's worthless. He's not been educated. He's more interested in the royalty part. So who's going to be the guy that gets them out of trouble? Yeah, the Prime Minister, George Grenville. Okay, it will be George Grenville's job, once he assumed the leadership of Parliament, he's going to need to initiate measures to put the empire on sound footing financially. Okay? So, now, George Grenville believes that the American colonists have a responsibility to help pay off Britain's war debts. Now, Miss Warner, why would he think that? Why would he have a right to think that these American colonists should pay off English war debts? Why would he think they should do that? Kind of. What are they helping them? Does Great Britain have a lot of enemies? So what are they providing that he thinks they should pay for? You're right there. What? Well, we don't want that. So the American colonies are just hanging out there, right? So what would say that France or Spain or somebody else wouldn't want that, right? So what is Britain wanting them to pay for? Protection, that way, defense. So what George Grenville's saying is this: hey, you need to help pay this war debt because we're defending you against all enemies of England. If somebody comes and attacks the American colonies, we're going to rush over there and defend you. Selfish thought, because they want the land anyway, right? So, Carter, what might be another reason that Grenville expects the American colonists to pay that war debt down?
They're technically own colonies.
They own the colonies, which makes the people there what? British citizens, okay? Just like Donald Trump expects me to pay taxes to help run this country, okay? George Grenville expected the colonists to help pay for the English war debt because they were loyal subjects of the king. They were citizens of Great Britain. They weren't Americans because there was no America, right? They were just colonies. They were under British rule. So they weren't citizens of the United States of America because there was no United States of America. So Grenville expected the American colonists to help pay the English off for war debts because they thought they were loyal. They said they were loyal subjects of the King of England, and that they wanted to make them realize that you need to pay for your own defense in case someone wants to come and invade. Now here's the problem. Does that sound, I mean seriously, does that sound unreasonable? It really doesn't, does it? Okay, I want you to help pay our debts off because we are protecting you from attack from our enemies, and you're citizens of our country. Why wouldn't you help with that, right? The problem was, this happened all of a sudden, okay? Because for the previous 100 years, England really didn't pay a lot of attention to the colonies. They just let them go on their own. Now, all of a sudden, when England's in trouble financially, they want them to kick into the kitty. Does that make sense? Well, for 100 years, that wasn't the deal. So I'll give you an example. So all of a sudden, when you register for your senior year next year, when you come to registration to get your locker, they're going to charge you $500 to have a locker because they need to re-maintain those. Those are crappy lockers. We need to replace them all. And so starting next year, everybody that comes in has got to pay $500 for their locker because we got to take that money and put all new lockers in. What would your reaction be to that? Well, no, we'll just say you have to have it, okay? You have to have a locker and you got to pay $500. What would be your reaction to that? You'd be pissed off, wouldn't you? And your parents would be mad, right? And your grandparents would be mad, right? And your friends would be mad, and their parents would be mad. And the alumni that hadn't paid a dime for a locker for the last 100 years at Moreland High School, they'd all be mad, right? Because they're saying, what the hell? We got to pay $500 for a locker? We haven't ever had to do that. That's the same thing that these American colonists felt. We've been sitting here for 100 years, you haven't asked us for a dime, and now you're going to stick us? Come on, are you kidding me? So they're all upset. Does that make sense? Even though it made sense that they probably should have to pay, they weren't used to that. Now let me ask you this. Do you think George Grenville realized that these measures he's going to put in to tax the colonies was going to meet strong opposition? He knew it was going to. He absolutely knew it. You know what I mean? Now, the problem that they had on the colonies, do you think the colonists paid taxes? Do you think during that 100 years that Britain left them alone, did they pay taxes? Yeah, they did, because you had to run the colonies, right? The problem was the colonies were all separate entities. 13 different separate entities. So they taxed the people of Massachusetts, and they paid taxes to run Massachusetts, right? The difference was this. They had elected Congress people, men at that time, to represent them. So when they went and asked them for the taxes, they were willing to pay it because they knew the tax was going to go to Massachusetts, and they elected the people to make up their minds they needed money. So they all did that, right? Well, all of a sudden now, the British Parliament, 3,000 miles away, is asking them to pay taxes, and they have no representation in Parliament to talk about it, right? So they are screaming the famous term we always hear, taxation without representation, right? Is that what they're doing? They're mad. They feel like they're being taxed without being represented. And it's right. Did they mind paying that tax in Virginia? Because they had elected congressmen to represent them, and they knew that they needed that money to make Virginia go. Did they want to pay money to make England go? No. Would you? Especially if you have nobody over there representing you. And I think we talked about this, I don't know if some of you were gone, but in the District of Columbia, which is not a state in this country, the people that live there are actually taxed without representation because there are no senators or members of the House elected to Congress from Washington, D.C. So they are still taxed without representation, which I find incredibly odd, to be honest with you, because that's what we went to war for. Now, I'm going to give you another example of taxation without representation. This is funny because my son and I were talking about this weekend. My son came down to golf in the golf tournament, and we were talking about golf. Any golfers in here? Anybody know anything about golf in here? Do you have any golfers? Not, okay, Luke's a golfer, so you might know some of this. So we have a tournament last weekend for the DC Scramble. It's a 4-person scramble. It costs you $50 to get in, and then you have we can give a first, second, third, and that's the way it went. Okay. Well, there are some high-powered tournaments out there where they bet on the people to win the tournaments. Now I'll try to explain this to you because it's even a little convoluted to me a little bit. But anyway, so my son was in this big tournament in Glendive, Montana. 3-person best ball, okay? In other words, all 3 golfers golf and you got to post a score and it's a big time tournament. Well, they play 2 days. And after the first day, they come in and eat and drink too many beers and get drunked up. And then they have a Calcutta that evening. Anybody know what a Calcutta is? What is that?
And they auction off like the team that'll...
You auction off the team. So Daniel and Mortimer and Schmelzer are a team. And I think, I'm in the tournament golf myself, but I think they're a pretty good team. So I'm going to bet money on them that they're going to win the tournament. And if they win the tournament, then I win probably 3 or 4 times the money that I bet, right? By the way, if you ever bet on something like that, bet on the old guys with big handicaps, because they always win. The good golfers, they post a good score, but they got no handicap. The old farts, they sandbag like me. They get a pretty good handicap, and then they add the handicaps in, and then you win. So just a little hint there. But anyway, so my son is golfing with these 2 guys that are fairly serious, and my son's a good golfer, but he's not overly competitive in golf. He likes to golf, whatever. But his wife's from Glendive, and her cousin's husband's one of these 3 guys, and they talk him into getting this tournament because he's a pretty good golfer, and they think they got a shot of winning this thing, right? So anyway, they go out the first day, and they golf pretty good. I don't remember their score. And he goes home because he's got a wife and a couple of kids, under a little more pressure. Well, these guys don't have any kids, so they stay out there and eat and get drunked up. And they decide to bid on themselves to win the tournament. You never do that because you put all kinds of pressure on yourself to perform the next day. Well, my son has no idea they've done this, right? So they bet $1,200 that they're going to win. Fine. Well, they stink it up the second day and don't win any money. So my son has no idea what's going on here. He's just golfing, having fun. And pretty soon one of the guys comes up and says, by the way, Matty, I bet $1,200 on us last night. We lost, so I need to have your $400. Well, what would your reaction to that be? I'm being taxed without representation. I wasn't at that Calcutta auction. I didn't say that I was going to have any part. I had no representation in your $1,200, right? So I'm not paying you back that $400. I never say. Well, if he doesn't do that, then what's he? He's kind of jackass of the deal, right? Because he's not living up to what he agreed to. Well, he really never agreed to that. He agreed to golf in the tournament with the guys, right? So as I was telling him, I said, that's an example of taxation without representation. You got taxed $400 that you were unaware of, and you weren't at the meeting where you spent the $1,200 to go golf. Does that kind of make sense, what taxation without representation? He wasn't very happy because he didn't have any say in whether he wanted to invest in that or not. The American colonies feel like they don't have any say in what they're investing in for their tax money. Yeah. He did. Yeah, because he didn't want to be the guy that was the bad guy who would, welched on his... Yeah, he paid and was still mad about it. But he got taxed without representation, right? Okay. Well, that'll take us to our next subtopic, which is the first of several laws or acts we'll talk about to try to raise revenue for the colonies. Aisha's right there.
Where? Oh.
Anyway, the Sugar Act of 1764. Now, was the Proclamation of 1763, Carter, was that taxation without representation? Yeah, where they settled the issue of the Western lands, was that taxation without? No, because there was no money. So this Sugar Act of 1764 is going to be the first of many stinging blows that are going to hit the colonists concerning taxation without representation. Okay? So first one they hear about. Now, Parliament really passed the Sugar Act of 1764 for 2 reasons. First reason's what? Obvious, they wanted to raise money to do what? Pay off their debt. Well, the second reason, they probably shouldn't have made this very public, the second reason they passed the Sugar Act is so they would reduce the debt for those back in Great Britain. If the colonies pay more, they pay less, right? Well, how would you like that? Isn't that kind of like a double zinger? We're going to have you pay because we believe that you should pay for your own defense, and by the way, your money will help the people back in Great Britain not have to pay as much taxes. I bet that went over big. You see what I'm saying? So that was a big kind of a stinger. So, this is a pretty easy question, I think, but we'll figure it out. So Riley, tell me this. What did the Sugar Act place a duty or tax on? What were they taxing in the Sugar Act? One thing they taxed was sugar. So if you bought sugar, you paid an extra tax on that. And where'd that tax money go? Went back to Britain. That made it a direct tax. You know what a direct tax is? A direct tax is a tax where the money goes back to the governmental entity that administered the tax. Okay? So if Miss Denise taxes us, we pay it right back to her. It doesn't go to Miss Warner or Miss Zimmerman. It goes straight to her because she passed the law. That's a direct tax. Okay? What else did they tax, do you think? Yeah, it starts with an M and kind of goes with sugar. Molasses, very good. Molasses. They taxed molasses. First two weren't that big of a deal. But the third thing they taxed was a big deal. So the Sugar Act placed a duty or a direct tax on sugar, on molasses. This is the bad one that really ticked them off. It put a tax on all items that were imported into America from places other than, come on, Britain. Okay? So what were they doing? Monopolizing the trade. So if you buy from Britain, American colonies, we won't tax you. But if you buy from France or Spain or anywhere else, when that shipment comes into harbor, we're going to tax you on that before it's delivered to you. Yeah.
How did tax, how were they aware?
How, who's aware?
How were those Great Britain aware of the shipments?
Oh, well, that's a good question. We'll get to that. That's a very good question. Okay? So, all items imported from